You know, if it's not about sports, I find it very hard to concentrate.
Real quick, guys, before I get started, go subscribe to my second channel, Braden's Burner. It's where I'll be uploading if this channel ever gets yeeted off the platform. The Butterfly Effect. Depending on who you ask, it's either a corny early 2000s movie or a complex theory that proposes a small change can have large differences at a later time. The name comes from the fact that in the 1960s, a meteorology professor at MIT said that something as small as a butterfly flapping its wings in one part of the world can cause a hurricane in another part of the world. This would be used as a metaphor to explain how small changes in conditions could lead to large unpredictable outcomes that diverge greatly from those initial conditions. The Washington Redskins had existed as a team since 1932 when they were known as the Boston Braves. The team existed as the Boston Redskins from 1933 until 1936, and then finally the Washington Redskins from 1937 until 2019. In 1933, the first season that the team used the Redskins name, 4 players and the head coach were Native Americans. The franchise would officially get rid of the Redskins name and logo in 2020, amidst pressure from sports writers, some Native American communities, and team sponsors. Leading the charge was FedEx, who owned the naming rights to the Redskins stadium. The reason I said FedEx led the charge is because they threatened to remove their name from the stadium, which would cost the franchise big money. Speaking of FedEx, let's talk about them. The Federal Express Corporation was founded in 1971 by Fred Smith in Little Rock, Arkansas. Smith was a graduate of Yale and actually came up with the idea for FedEx for a term project at Yale, which he said was a system specifically designed for urgent deliveries. His professor, however, didn't see the logic and gave Fred a C on the project. Fred Smith began formal operations in 1973 when he moved the company to Memphis, Tennessee. He set up shop at the Memphis International Airport, but Fred Smith found out that running a company was much harder than he anticipated. Fuel costs around this time were soaring, and FedEx began to lose money. By 1974, Fred Smith had just $5,000 left among the various FedEx corporate bank accounts, and efforts to secure more funding were repeatedly turned down. He owed $24,000 in fuel bills that were due soon, and on top of that, he needed money to meet payroll so that his employees could get paid. So what's a man to do when his entire future is in jeopardy? Gamble and risk everything, and that's exactly what he did. Smith traveled to Las Vegas and took the last $5,000 the company had and bet it all on blackjack because a friend had told him that out of all the tabletop games, blackjack was the luckiest. So he sat down at a table and at first made small bets, but as he continued to win, he bet larger and larger sums, and he kept winning. In fact, he was on such a hot streak that a small group of people gathered to watch, and Fred continued to win, piling up chips. But he ignored the crowd. He was way too focused on the game of blackjack that he was involved in. After all, this was literally his livelihood he was gambling with. All told, he won $27,000, which was enough to keep FedEx afloat for a little while longer. This $27,000 boost gave him enough time to secure $11 million in funding, and with that $11 million, FedEx grew, and by 1976, the company was worth $75 million, and by 1983, FedEx hit $1 billion in revenue. By the time the 1990s rolled around, Redskins owner Jack Kent Cooke was looking to replace the Redskins' home venue, RFK Stadium. A new stadium was eventually built, but unfortunately, Cooke died mere months before it opened, and his sons named the stadium in honor of their father. The venue, located in Landover, Maryland, was originally known as Jack Kent Cooke Stadium and opened on September 14, 1997, with the Redskins playing the Arizona Cardinals. Dan Snyder ended up purchasing the Redskins from the Cooke family in 1999 and ended up selling the naming rights to our old friends, the FedEx Company, and put them on a 27-year lease at $7.6 million per year. The stadium was renamed FedEx Field. The Redskins name and logo had long been controversial. For decades leading into the 2000s, several activist groups had been putting pressure on the organization to get rid of the name and logo, which they felt were racially insensitive. In 2013, Dan Snyder penned a letter to Redskins season ticket holders saying he respected the opinions of those that were offended by the name and logo, but also included that a poll done by the Anneburg Public Policy Center found that 90% of Native Americans polled were not personally offended by the branding. this particular poll was essentially replicated in 2016 by the Washington Post. However, a study done in 2020 by the University of Michigan and the University of California at Berkeley found that 49% of Native Americans polled found the branding to be offensive. So even in the most favorable of polls that was done for the side wanting a change, it was still found to be the minority opinion. In Schneider's 2013 letter, he reiterated that the name was never meant to be offensive, but rather a badge of honor. It's also important to note that the logo itself was designed by a Native American man by the name of Walter Blackie Wetzel, who served as the chairman for the Blackfoot tribe and the president of the National Congress of American Indians. The logo itself depicts a profile of Chief Whitecalf of the Blackfoot tribe, with the circle of life around him. Whitecalf was well known as an early civil rights activist, fighting for equal treatment for Native Americans. Also in that logo are eagle feathers, because eagle feathers are considered sacred to many Native Americans, representing prayer, healing, and divine connection. The eagle is considered to be the strongest and bravest of all birds by many Native people, and the closest animal to the Creator. Schneider noted in his 2013 letter that the Redskins name is more than just a name. It is a source of pride and a symbol of strength and respect. Dan Snyder listened carefully to the commentary on both sides of the issue, and quickly found out that the majority consensus among Native people was that they found the Redskins name and logo to be an honor, rather than something that was meant to hurt and degrade. The team itself has a rich history intertwined with Native American culture, and many Native people felt that if the name was changed, part of their culture and heritage would be erased. Paul Woody, a columnist for the Richmond Times-Dispatch, also wanted to know how Native Americans felt about the name. He interviewed 3 leaders of Native American tribes in Virginia, and they all strongly supported the Redskins name. A former chief of the Potawatomi tribe, I probably butchered that pronunciation, leave me alone about it, went as far as to say he would be offended if they did change the name. He viewed it as an attempt to erase Native American culture. In 2014, the Washington Post announced they would no longer use the Redskins name in their media, and ESPN soon announced they would allow each individual columnist and/or reporter they employed to choose whether or not to use the name in works they published. Not much happened for a few more years until 2020, which was a year of racial tension and unrest following the death of George Floyd. BLM saw a resurgence, and a byproduct of that was many other movements also had a resurgence, such as Stop Asian Hate. But among those movements that gained a new life in 2020 was the push for the Redskins to rebrand. By the summer of 2020, many sponsors of the Redskins were voicing support for rebranding the Redskins. Among those companies was the sponsor of the team's stadium, none other than FedEx. Nike and Pepsi were also other prominent brands to threaten to cut ties with the team, but FedEx arguably was the one that mattered the most. FedEx still had a few years left on its lease, and to lose that money would hurt big time. By mid-June of 2020, the groups involved in pressuring Dan Schneider to rebrand were starting to mobilize. And on June 26, 2020, a letter signed by 87 shareholders and investors worth a combined $620 billion was sent to the 3 main companies that were sponsors of the Redskins at the time. Those companies were FedEx, Pepsi, and Nike. The shareholders asked the companies to cut ties with the Redskins unless a name change was initiated. On July 2nd, FedEx threatened to remove their name from the stadium if Snyder did not rebrand the team identity. That same day, Nike removed all Redskins merchandise from their online shop. And finally, on July 13th, 2020, the team announced they were retiring the Redskins name and logo. For FedEx at least, it was a complete 180 from their previous position on the matter. In 2014, the shipping company had actually stood by Snyder after the Oneida tribe of Indians asked them to reconsider the stadium naming rights agreement. But this was 6 years later in 2020, and it was no longer politically or financially convenient for them, so they went with the changing winds, not out of any sort of principle, but rather to protect their bottom line. And so, nearly a century of Native history and culture was erased. Just like that. I'll let you guys decide how to feel about that. In 2023, a lawsuit was filed against the team, which by this point was going by its current name, the Washington Commanders. Well, more specifically, the current owner, Josh Harris. The lawsuit was filed by the Native American Guardians Association, or NAGA for short. The lawsuit says that they view the name change as an erasure of Native culture, which was done in the past by government and continues today. The lawsuit even says that NAGA is exemplifying bravery and courage in fighting back against a giant, powerful foe. The lawsuit also states that they view the Redskins name and logo as a sign of reverence and respect, but the meat and potatoes of the lawsuit is that the NAGA alleges that a team employee called the organization fake while in a conversation with a former luxury box owner, so the group sued for defamation. Now, I personally couldn't find anywhere in the suit where they named specifically who made the comment, and as far as I can tell, there's no proof that anybody called the NAGA fake at all. But I think we can all agree that if this comment was made, it is disgusting, vile, and racist, and should be absolutely condemned by the organization. When asked for comment, the Washington Commanders said they looked into it and said they found the claim was without merit and they would address it further in court. A federal judge eventually dismissed the lawsuit in 2024. But the logo and name still live on, sort of. Red Mesa High School, located in Arizona, use a similar Chief White Calf logo and call themselves the Redskins, and the majority of the student body are Native American. I guess when it comes to these things, the wise thing to do is listen to those individuals that the supposedly racist name and logo affect. And it seems that for many of those native folks, the majority even, they consider it to be an honor. Okay, so you got me. The title is kind of clickbait. The name change probably would have happened whether or not FedEx was around. If it wasn't FedEx, it would have been a different company that held the stadium naming rights, and they too would have eventually caved into societal pressure to erase native culture. Not to mention Nike and Pepsi were already pressuring Snyder, so it was bound to happen eventually anyway. Also, it's hard to say how it would have turned out had Snyder decided to keep the name. FedEx may have still had to pay the remainder of the lease, but it probably would have ended up going to court. And regardless of the outcome, the team would lose a ton of money, even if they won in court. Typically, court battles of that nature drag on for years and years, and no doubt would have cost a fortune. But it's safe to say, even still, that the butterfly effect is definitely a real thing, and that FedEx threatening to remove its name from the stadium was definitely the tipping point. And all because of a lucky night in a casino over 50 years ago. If you liked this video, leave a like. If you hated it, leave a dislike. But either way, comment for the algorithm. Peace out.
I can never ever find the right words, and there's no way this is real life. There's no telling you're the right girl, so I can only say that it feels right. It feels right, it feels right. Yeah, I can only say that it feels right. It feels right, it feels right. Yeah, I can only say that it feels right.